Tonight's sponsor is Interlock Broadheads, precision and quality broadheads made right here in the USA. Come join us in taking the Interlock Challenge. These handmade, beautiful custom knives are brought to you by Knight Blade Works. You can find them on Facebook under Matthew Blade Works. Susquehanna Custom Lures, home of the Ken's Redfin. You can find them at www.susquehannalures.com. Backcountryinnovated.com. Utilizing deer antlers has never been so easy. Come join the new innovated European mount system. Northern Mountain Game Calls. Handcrafted quality calls and lanyards at prices that will keep you coming back for more.
There we go.
All right.
I bumped a button. I'm sorry.
Well, you're good. So, hey, tonight is our special guest. We have Juliet Flint. She is with Stern Game Recovery, and I believe Stern is with her right now. So, as always, we start very easy, very open, and, we just conversate from there. So, Juliet, what I'll do is I'll let you kind of take the show. I'll let you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and then about Stern Game Recovery.
Absolutely. And I am happy to take the show. That is a threat. So thank you very much for having us. And I apologize in advance for how much you're about to learn about what we do, because I could talk the ears off a statue. I have the coolest job in the world. He said, my name is Juliet Flint. I am a professional wounded game tracker and a canine handler. I run my own business as Stern Game Recovery, but I work as part of a broader statewide network here in Minnesota. That was Minnesota Tracking Dogs. And we recover wounded game. Deer and bear. The entire time from September on through December, we're on call 24/7 helping hunters in northern Minnesota when they make a bad shot or they don't have a blood trail. We go in and we recover wounded large game animals for them.
So I guess I have to ask the number one question is, and I ask this because you don't see a lot of women involved, and I'm intrigued. I love that. To see more and more women involved in anything outdoors. I wish there was a ton more. So what got you into this? What got you started?
That is the golden question. I am really lucky to be following the footsteps of quite a few incredibly skilled outdoors women before me. Believe it or not, wounded game recovery was legalized in the country. Like the movement to legalize the use of trained tracking dogs to recover wounded game was spearheaded by a married couple, John and Yolanta Janani, back in the 70s. And they really helped to legitimize the method and make it what it is today. And Yolanta, I'm really honored to say, has been a role model to me for my entire career. And she is still working within the field today. So I am following the footsteps of a lot of other really skilled women and learning from them, even now as I go, and I'm pretty well established in my career. So I'm not the first, and thankfully I will not be the last. But when I started, I was apprenticing to be a narcotics detection dog handler. So I had already made my foray into canine work. I knew that this was kind of the field I wanted to be in. But as it turns out, I'm really not much of an indoor cat. I didn't enjoy any part of the job that had to do with being under fluorescent lights all day doing inside stuff. And I didn't see any other avenue for me to do canine work because I wasn't in the military. I wasn't law enforcement. It's a hard field to get into. So I kind of stuck with that when I was very young, for starting out when I was about 18. And I happened to meet another woman who has since retired from wounded game recovery altogether, but a woman by chance who was willing to take me and my crazy little working line German Shepherd puppy. Stern was like maybe 6 months old at that time. And she was willing to hear me out and hear me and lay just a training exercise for us. And I was off to the races from there. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. This is what I want to do. And that poor woman let me shadow under her for an entire year before she was kind of like, okay, you need to go do your own thing now. But I learned almost everything that I knew at that point, just following another female tracker. I had some excellent role models along the way. Thank you for the stuffed toy, Stern. I really don't want it. And like I said, it was really kismet from there. Once I got my feet under me, and realized that this is what I wanted to do. I've been voracious since then. It's been pretty nonstop, go, go, go from there.
So how many years have you been doing it?
5 years. I started when I was 20 years old, and this is now our 5th season. So Stern is now 5 years old. So we've been trucking together ever since that first training track that other very patient tracker was willing to entertain me on. And tracking has spearheaded me into other avenues of my career as a canine handler, working in conservation detection and wildlife research that I probably never would have had the opportunity to do if it hadn't been for those incredible female outdoors women that paved the way before me. So I have the coolest job in the world, and we are 5 years in.
I'll tell you what, I watched some of your stuff, and I said it before we got on live, and I just think it's awesome. You know, you're getting through them stickers and getting tore up. That poor dog's taking a beating. It's amazing what some of these creatures can run through and the amount of beatings that you take going through it. So.
Oh God, yeah. You know, especially tracking as many wounded bears as we do. It is nasty country up here in northern Minnesota. I have taken hunters into some of the thickest stuff I think they've ever seen in their entire lives, and been able to show them a dead bear in the end of it. And I tell folks there's a point at which I'm not even doing you a favor by finding that bear anymore, because then you have to find a way to get it out of there. Like this hunter this morning had to sling that bear over his shoulders and give it a piggyback ride because there was no getting a sled back in that stuff.
Looked like it was a taxidermy bear when I watched that video this morning.
Right? You know, I took the video and I was like, people are going to think this bear's alive or like it's AI or something. No, they're just hauling him out of there. It's a free ride.
Yep, I thought it was a taxidermy bear at first. I was like, what are they up to? I just
Right?
laughed. So
We're just going for a
do you
ride.
track all different kinds of animals? I mean, I see in your videos, I see you have bear and deer. I mean, are you going?
So in northern Minnesota, Minnesota as a whole, it is only legal to use trained tracking dogs to recover deer and bear. Those are the only wounded game that you can use a dog to recover. In the scope of our wildlife research work through the rest of the year, we work with a pretty wide variety of species. But in the course of tracking, it's all bear and all deer.
Now, I watched one of your, I don't want to say videos. I watched one of your posts. Were you tracking mushrooms?
We do quite a bit of extracurriculars. And honestly, it's almost a necessity to keep Stern busy. This is not a dog that's content to be, she has to be doing. So she is trained to detect a variety of edible mushrooms, and she helps me forage and keep food on the table, especially when we're on long field deployments doing research projects. It's slim pickings at some of those grocery stores way out in the sticks, and her ability to help me find morel mushrooms, lobster mushrooms. We've been working on indigo milky caps, but that's kind of a hard one to find, so we haven't had as much practice there. Anyways, but she does find wild mushrooms and helps me keep food on the table.
I seen her sit by him. I'm like,
yeah,
dude, the dog just found wild mushrooms.
Yeah. And honestly, she's better at finding them than I am at this point. I just kind of follow her.
Yeah, I was mind blown. I tell you what, I would love to know. So I'm going to kind of have you walk us through this. Yeah. I want to know the day of a tracker and a tracking dog. Now, I realize the dog can't get up and tell us its side, so I'm going to. It would be great.
Let me see how I can phrase this with as few bad words as possible. If my mother is watching, I'd like for her not to wince the whole way through. So our day is very feast or famine. We're on call 24/7. So really, it matters how many hunters are having a bad day in terms of how busy we are. Nobody's calling us because their hunt is going perfect. Nobody calls us because they made a perfect shot and they're having a good day. But generally speaking, especially this time of year where we have both bear and deer calls coming in, my day starts at probably about 4 a.m. And I'm lining up calls right now as we speak. Actually, my phone is going off with hunters that are waiting for help first thing in the morning. So I start lining up calls in the evening the night before, and I'm getting information from hunters that helps me determine how long we need to wait before tracking their animal based on where they're likely to have wounded it. I try my best to position myself geographically so I can help as many hunters as possible, but we hit the ground running at 4 a.m. And that's, I'm force feeding, getting contact lenses in, getting the dog fed, throwing my pants on and getting out the door. And from that point forward, we are driving all over the northern half of Minnesota, helping as many hunters as we can to either recover their animal and find it dead, or to give them peace of mind that there's no recovering it in the first place. And like I said, it's pretty feast or famine. Today we started our morning tracking a wounded bear that we did recover. Like you saw in that video, gave him a free ride out of the swamp. And then we took a break through the afternoon because it was too hot to safely work the dog. In those 80-degree temps, heat injury is a big risk, especially for a dog like Stern, who does not stop. I have to physically be like, okay, I'm going to put you in a kennel and we're going to take a break or you're going to overheat. So we went back out this evening to help a gentleman track what is almost definitely a shoulder shot buck. And that deer's still up and moving. There was no recovery for us, no dead deer to be found. And now we're back here and I'm doing a podcast interview, and then hopefully I can get some sleep tonight and do the whole thing over again tomorrow.
So when you go out there and you run the dog, I ask because I've watched a lot of videos on it, personally never experienced it. Do you have a leash? If you have a leash, what's the length? Or, and tell me a little bit about your process. I'm curious.
Yeah. And honestly, at this point in my career, with the number of animals that we track in a year, I think I've got the process down to as much of a science as it's ever going to be. So I roll up and the dog knows that I've got a script. It's a spiel. Every time it's the same thing. I think some of these poor hunters feel like they're in Groundhog Day if they've worked with us more than once. I roll up and I ask folks, did you call for a tracking dog? They say, yep. I say, awesome, I'm your gal. Introduce myself, and then give them the rigmarole, which is, needing to know where the animal was shot at physically on the body, as well as where the hit site was. Kind of talking them through the potential for different types of shot placements, what organs they may have hit, the likelihood that we're looking at a dead animal. That's all my job as the human half of the team, is to know the forensics. And be able to give hunters a realistic idea of what we're looking at in terms of the likelihood that their animal is recoverable. From there, I get Stern unloaded, get all of her gear on. Depending on the time of year and the animal we're tracking, she usually wears a Kevlar vest, kind of similar to the cut vests that hog hunting dogs will wear. And that keeps her safe both from that really nasty brush that you mentioned, getting cut up from hawthorn, thorns, and prickly ash and what all, as well as occasionally we'll have an animal that's still alive and not very happy to see us. So I get Stern all of her armor on, we grab our gear, and then we walk into the hit site together. So the hunter shows me where the animal was standing when they shot it. I put a 30-foot line on Stern. Legally in Minnesota, the dog has to be on leash 100% of the time. So the state maximum is 30 feet. And that's a pretty good sweet spot in terms of giving the dog plenty of room to work. So we use a 30-foot climbing rope. And from that point forward, I tell the hunters, your job is kind of just to stay behind me, look for blood, because I'm watching the dog. I'm not really worried if there's any blood on the ground visible. But from there, I'm attached to the dog with 30 feet of rope. She's going where the bear or the deer went. And in all likelihood, that bear or deer is not going where it's easy to follow. So most of my day from that point forward looks like me army crawling through bear tunnels or vaulting over deadfall and keeping up with a dog who really, really, really wants to find whatever animal I just put her on.
I said I watch videos. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you keep up, because that dog is moving. That dog is full of energy.
It's a lot of fun. It's like parkour, but with a lot more risk of losing an eye. I'm wearing safety goggles and gloves and the whole 9 yards, and I still get tore up pretty good sometimes. But the nice thing about working with a dog on lead like that is, I get to see a lot of the sign that she's following. So if I'm army crawling through that bear tunnel like this morning, I'm able to see blood 2 inches from my face that you might walk right by if you weren't physically crawling through the tunnel that the bear went. And also, get some cardio in. It's like Pilates sometimes, army crawling through some of those tunnels. It's never boring at the very least.
No need for the gym.
No, not in my world. And honestly, for as exciting as it can be for me as the tracker, keeping up with a dog that really, really wants to move fast, it is a lot more efficient than anything the hunter is liable to do by themselves. I can't tell you how often I hear from hunters that Stern and I cover a blood trail that took them hours to establish in 5 minutes flat. If we're going to find an animal dead, generally we find it in under 30 minutes. It's a really quick, efficient process. It's a lot of fun to watch. Just maybe less fun when you're directly behind the dog going through all the thick stuff with her.
Yeah, I could see how that's not near as fun.
I mean, I must think it's fun because I keep doing it, but I tell hunters a lot. I'm like, I hope you like crawling. I'm sorry in advance for what I'm about to bring you through. I promise it's worth it. She's on it. You just got to keep up with me.
So your average tracking in a day, what are you averaging? I mean, you're saying 3 to 5?
Generally, this year's actually been fairly slow. We are, what's the date today? We're 15 days into our season for bear, and bow hunting in Minnesota just opened this last weekend. So we have tracked 30 bears so far this year, and today was our first deer call. So it, honestly, a slow year for us, but I would say we average anywhere from 2 to 5 animals per day.
Wow, it's a lot of moving. And
Yeah.
and you said you track a lot more bear than deer.
During bear season, yes, we prioritize. Well, I won't say prioritize bear calls. We get a lot of bear calls, so we end up tracking a lot of them. But of course, bear season in Minnesota is only about a month long. So once bear season is over, just because deer season is longer for us, we track, I'd say, between 30 to 50 bears each year. And on average, we're looking at anywhere from 40 to 60 deer. And that number, thankfully, is rising all the time. There's a lot more hunters that know that we're an option available to them. They know that tracking dogs are a pretty safe bet to find their animals. They're more willing to call us every year.
Now, as you're going through this brush and you're following the dog, do you have any fear that one of these 300-400 pound black bears are going to be?
We've had some exciting run-ins. I'm sure you can imagine a live wounded bear is never happy to see us. Really, my biggest fear is just keeping Stern safe. That dog is all of 60 pounds soaking wet. If she gets in a fight with a bear, she ain't going to win. And we are very specifically a recovery team. We are not hunting out there. As soon as we figure out an animal is still alive, we're backing out. We're not continuing the chase. That's up to the hunter at that point to continue the hunt. So I'm very rarely concerned for my own safety. But there is always an element of, like I said, they're not exactly happy to see us. No bear that we come up on in a tunnel like that is going to be excited that we're there. And even deer during the rut, especially, some of these bucks are almost more dangerous than a black bear is. I have known other trackers whose dogs were gored by bucks, who were picked up and thrown. I've had friends who were attacked by the buck themselves and got gored. Thankfully, nothing that dramatic has happened to us yet, but there's definitely an element of, those animals aren't happy to see you. There's always a little bit of danger, but I'm mostly concerned about keeping Stern safe.
So you don't carry handgun, none of those things.
When I'm tracking wounded bears, I do carry a sidearm, and so we open carry. We don't make it a secret, but the goal is never to use it because, like I said, we're a recovery team. We are not hunting animals out there. It's always a matter of being responsible with our wait times to make sure we give that animal plenty of time to die, and being very conscious of what Stern is telling me, because she'll let me know when we're close to a bear that maybe is recently dead or isn't dead yet. And I've gotten very good over the years at reading really subtle body language from her that tells me that we might be in for a bit of a rodeo. So I'm pretty careful, but I do carry a sidearm, yes, during bear season. For deer, we're pretty quick. We'll get out of the way.
I got to commend you on that, because I got to tell you, I'm a big boy, and I don't know if I want to tangle with a bear. So the fact that you can go in there pretty brave.
Bears, honestly, like I said, some of those deer are nastier than any bear could try to be. We've had some bears that were not super happy in stories that, get your blood pumping a little bit. But the bucks that are in rut are more worrisome to me because they do not seem to have very much self-preservation. You get a really roided out buck, when they're in the thick of it, and their neck is like a 5-gallon bucket. Those deer are not going to stop for you. I have had them almost plow me and the hunter over, like just run right over you. That's the stuff that worries me almost more than the bears do. Bears are kind of cowards. They don't really want to pick a fight with you. If anything, like I said, they'll come after the dog. So I'm just very cautious to keep her safe. But man, deer are mean. Deer are meaner than people give them credit for.
Well, now you told me that you have a few stories. I'm gonna have it. We're gonna do it. I got to hear one of these stories.
Oh boy!
Give me your worst case story that's happened.
The worst case story.
Maybe
there's a handful of those. I think the one that comes to mind most recently is actually one that I talk about in an article that I wrote for Bow Hunting World magazine that comes out next month. So this is like a story that people might hear more than once from me. I'm going to sound like a broken record. It is what it is. But in this case, it was a nice, clean, happy ending. The bear lived. The bear wanted nothing to do with us by the time we were done in there, but I was tracking what I later found out was very much a shoulder shot bear in a swamp. And I was working with a guide and a hunter who didn't know us very well yet. So there's always kind of a pressure, you know, especially with a guide or an outfitter that I would like to maintain a relationship with. I want a track to go well. I want it to look good. I want them to, when I leave, be like, wow, Juliet and Stern are really professionals. We're going to call them all the time. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So we're working really hard on this bear. And we're trucking along. We get about 800 yards in. And the bear is no longer bleeding at this point, but I have no question that Stern's on it. So we're just moving. We're going through the motions. You know, Stern's moving. I'm just talking to the guide and the hunter in the background. And I start noticing we're coming up on a lot of beds. And it's all in a fairly straight line. So it tells me it's probably our one individual bear that we're looking for. And it's a bed, and then another 10, 20 feet, and then there's a bed, and then another 10, 20 feet, and there's a bed. And I start to think to myself, I'm like, this bear is starting to hurt. There's something going on here. And so Stern doesn't miss a beat. She keeps moving, and we come up on a big, like a wall of a willow thicket. I mean, it was dense. It was really nasty stuff. And of course, I'm looking at that, like, please don't go in there. She finds a bear tunnel that's about this big, and we're going in there. And when she goes, I mean, I have no choice but to follow this dog. I trust her. I know she knows what she's doing. So if she goes into some nasty stuff, I'm buckling up. I'm going in too, and we're just going to see what comes out. So I get on all fours, and I'm belly crawling into this tunnel with her, and it's so thick. There's a ceiling above my head that gives me maybe a couple inches of clearance at most. I can't stand in there. There's no chance I can even like sit up straight. So I'm just shimmying in after her, and we get like, you know, probably about 10 yards into this thicket, and I call to the guide because I can see Stern ahead of me, and she's standing in an empty bed. You know, there's a pretty big tamp. This is a big bear. And she's just staring straight ahead. She's not looking at me. She's not really moving anymore. And I can barely get to her. I mean, I'm crawling. So I call to the guide, and I'm like, you know, I think Stern's got something in here. I don't see any blood. I definitely don't see any bear. Can you just come in here? You know, can you walk in and see if you can see anything? Well, he doesn't know where the hell I am. Like, I'm so deep in this thicket, he can't see me and the dog. So he's like waiting through this thicket, trying to walk his way through it. And he's like 10 yards off to my side. So I know he's in this thicket with us, but I can't see him and he can't see me. And I'm just watching this dog. And probably 30 seconds goes by until I can work my way up to her. You know, I'm slithering around like a snake in there. It's not dignified. And I finally get to her. And just as I come up to her, I hear a twig break. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's a grouse or a woodcock in here. You know, she's a dog. Maybe she gets distracted. And then she starts growling. And the twig starts growling back. And at that point, I call to the guy, and I'm like, hey, we got a situation. And I'm calling like, hey, bear, whoa, bear. You know, that gets her blood pressure to spike a little bit. I grab Stern by her oh shit handle. It's a big leather collar that she wears in the field because sometimes I just need to be able to grab her really fast, like a case like this. So I get her by the handle, and I start hauling us backward through this tunnel, but I can't watch our back trail and find my way through this tunnel again. You know, like I said, it was not dignified in there. So I'm crawling, and I've got the dog behind me, and she does not want to go with me. She's trying to keep looking the direction she's looking. So I'm just dragging her, and I'm trying to guard my face. It's a mess in there. The guide still has no idea where we are in this thicket. He can just vaguely hear me like slithering around. And I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're getting there. We're almost to the end of this thicket where it pops us back out in this creek bank. And I never saw it coming. What happened was this big, probably 400 pound bear had doubled back on his own trail and was coming out the tunnel with us. That was the only exit. He didn't want to make his life harder than it needed to be. So he's going for his same tunnel. We're the intruders in this situation. We're in his entryway, and he was not willing to move. So I never saw this bear until he was probably 5 feet from me. And all I saw out of the corner of my eye is this dog of mine hit the end of her collar and just start roaring. I have never seen her that furious. I mean, she's slobbering and screaming mad. She's barking and growling. And I know immediately what's going on. I see the bear all of a sudden rear up on his hind legs as much as you can in that thick stuff. And I start yelling too. And I just am blurting whatever's coming out of my mouth. It's definitely not polite. Like, it is not English words that anybody should be saying if they want to be considered a professional. And the guide is somewhere out on the creek bank at this point. He heard me say, we have a situation, and he got out of Dodge. I don't blame him. He's got little babies at home. Like, he's got things to live for. I am in a bear tunnel, like fighting for my life at this point, hoping this bear doesn't want to come at us. That bear wanted so little to do with us. He was ass over tea kettle just about as soon as I could whip around and realize what was going on. Stern put the fear of God into that bear. He flips over backwards, and I see him start shinnying away as fast as he can, and he's crawling too at this point. He's in the thick stuff with us. And I grabbed that dog by the handle, and I like threw us out of this tunnel. Like I could not get us out of there fast enough. I didn't know where the bear was going. So we pop back out on this creek bank, and the guide is like white as a sheet. He's looking at me like I just rose from the dead, like he thought I was going to get eaten. And Stern is cool as a cucumber. She sits at my side and she's waiting for that bear to come out. But you would never know that she had just unleashed the full wrath that she had in her little 60-pound body, like a Valkyrie on the end of a leash there. And she got that bear out of our way. We did not have to fist fight a bear that day. It ended up being, we backed out for that night for sure. Like I said, we are a bear recovery team. We are not a bear fist fighting team. So we back out that night, and later in the evening, the guide is out in an opposite field tending to his cattle, and he sees that bear come out of that tunnel looking much worse for wear, looking around like he's expecting to get shot again, and he's limping real bad on one shoulder, but he's moving okay. And we go back in the morning, and sure enough, he's nowhere to be found. There's no sign of him anywhere in that thicket other than where you can see he was probably laying 10 feet from where Stern initially said, hey, that twig over there is going to growl at us. And you can see where he had worked his way up about 5 feet from where I was in that tunnel, and then flipped over backwards, decided he wanted nothing to do with that, got out of Dodge, sayonara, see you later. And that was all she wrote. Everybody got out safe. It was not a situation that anybody hopes to be in, but I don't like to think of how that could have gone if I didn't have the kind of dog that I do. She was ready to throw down with that bear if she thought it was coming anywhere near me.
No wonder you're not so worried if the dog's willing. I mean, the thing with a dog is, and the reality of it is, and I just proved it, that dog is willing to die to save you. I mean, that's what they'll do.
I hope I never have to find out, but I mean, I do joke to the hunters. I'm like, this dog will fight and she won't win. So that makes it our job to keep her safe, because I never want to put her in a situation like that again if I can help it, where it comes down to, oh, 60-pound German Shepherd does not need to be compensating for me putting us in a bad situation because I crawled into a bear tunnel I shouldn't have. You know what I mean? So it was exciting, but I hope it never happens twice.
Were you nervous going back in?
You know, honestly, when we came back in the next day, I brought half of that bear camp with us. And I was like, we're going to make a ton of noise. This isn't a stealth mission. We're not ninjas out here. I want this bear to know that we're coming back, because if he can get out of our way, I want him out of our way. So I was definitely not thrilled to be swimming across that creek for the second time in 48 hours. Because he went through some deep stuff. I mean, that creek was like shit high on me. So I got in there a second time. My boots hadn't even had time to dry yet. I think I was more annoyed about that fact at 4 a.m. than I was the fact that we were going back in after that bear. I knew that Stern had put the fear of God into him, so I figured he was long gone, and I was right. So, best case scenario.
Which one's your favorite to track out of the two?
Oh, you know, I don't want to pick a favorite, because I never want folks to not call us for one species or another. They say, oh, Juliet doesn't like tracking deer. I'm sure you can tell I have a real soft spot for black bears. That's probably my favorite thing to track. A little bit of it is cheating, because it is so much easier for a qualified trained dog to track a bear compared to a deer. They're smellier. There's a lot more going on. But we do track a substantial number of deer. I love meeting new people and working with hunters and getting to do the problem solving that this job comes down to. So I won't say that I have a favorite, but I really, really like bears.
It's your, you got to do what you like. If that's what you like, you can say favorite. You won't hurt my feelings.
Like I said, I never want somebody to say, oh, I'm not going to call Juliet to track this deer because I know she likes bear, because somebody somewhere is going to do that. So we track tons and tons of deer. I love that stuff. Like I said, all afternoon we were out after a buck. But there's just something about tracking a bear, because they don't like to bleed. A good tracking dog looks like magic. It's just a good time,
I want to hear from you one of your favorite stories instead of scariest, since you made everybody that was watching Peter Pan's. But I got to ask you, what's the hooves on the boots here, Chris? Can you?
Yeah. So let me tell you, that is the single worst pair of footwear on God's green earth. That is the worst stuff to tromp through the woods with, but it's really, really important because that is how we train the dogs, all of us as collectively as professional trackers, to identify and follow specifically a mortally wounded animal. So what the shoes are, it's like the footprint of a boot that you strap to the bottom of your shoes. And as you can see, you're taking the hooves from a deer and you're strapping those over the bottom. So there's like a sandwich of, you got a deer hoof making contact with the ground. And then you got the rubber boots that are holding the deer hoof to your foot. And then you strap that to your actual foot. And what we're doing there is taking hooves from a deer that ran for a while before it died and had an opportunity to accumulate scent in that intradigital gland. So the gland between the toes. And that's what contains the bulk of the scent that the dogs are looking for, which is adrenaline, cortisol, oh no, I'm in trouble hormones from a mortally wounded animal. Blood tracking dogs is a bit of a misnomer. A lot of folks call us blood trackers, but really a qualified dog does not need blood whatsoever in order to successfully track. What they're looking for is that invisible hormone trail from a mortally wounded animal. And so I can build that trail artificially in the off season, in the spring and summer when nobody's shooting deer, ideally. But I can do that using hooves that I have saved in the freezer from hunting season. And I strap them into those shoes after they've had a chance to thaw. And I will walk a trail along in the woods to mimic the trail of a mortally wounded animal that I can then let sit for 24 to 48 hours. And I bring Stern out there and we practice tracking outside of when we're actually tracking. Because it's really important for the dog to have lots of opportunities to problem solve things like grid searches, double backs, big loop-de-loos. Animals do a lot of weird stuff in the woods. And it's easy for me to mimic some of the scenarios that she might see in real life by using a pair of shoes like that and walking myself in a big old double back, or I'll walk in a big circle all around the edges of a field and then I'll pick a random exit and I'll leave it for her to work it out. And the ability to train like that is what makes a tracking dog just blindly trustworthy when you're out in the field on a real animal and you have no idea what might be going on.
Now, I know you said that these are on for boots.
Yes.
Ben's a big proponent of Crocs. Do they have a Croc adapter to it?
Somewhere on my silly little Facebook page, there is a picture of me strapping those to my Crocs. I cannot say I recommend it, but it works. I've done it. Maybe do as I say and not as I do, because I would never go to a new tracker and be like, you should do this in Crocs. You should do this in flip-flops. I just have done a lot of questionable things in my career, and Crocs with tracking shoes is absolutely one of them.
They've got to be so uncomfortable.
And the fun thing about those is those specific shoes are actually imported from Germany. They're kind of hard to get your grubby mitts on in the United States, but they come in one size. I'm not a small lady by any stretch of the imagination. I'm 5'9", but I got itty bitty feet. I wear a men's size 5. Those boots are twice the size of my actual feet. So I go out there, and not only am I standing on top of a deer hoof that wants to roll you around to either side, you're gonna break an ankle, but also those shoes are twice as big as my actual feet are. So I'm like a duck, waddling around out there with my little deer hooves on. It's a mess. It really is. But it's worth it because it keeps Stern busy. It's what makes us a qualified team. It's how we train for our certifications. And it's just plain fun to get to set up scenarios where I know what happened. I know that I walked in a star pattern for 30 minutes and then walked out of it. And to bring the dog in there 24 hours later and see how she problem solves that scent line. It's really, really cool. And it helps her be prepared for the next one.
I think I just figured out how they seen Bigfoot in Minnesota.
I think you might be onto something there.
Dude, you have some really incredible photos. Tell us your. So I gave, I asked for the scariest because people, I think a lot of people don't realize there can be them really horrifying moments, even when you love something you're doing. But tell us one of your greatest moments.
Ooh, this is a cheesy cop-out answer, but I'd be really hard-pressed to pick one. I've been so lucky in my career to be involved in some really just incredible recoveries. I mean, situations where you just don't think you're going to find the animal dead. I tell hunters I'm very honest if I think that, maybe it's not something we're going to be able to recover. And I love to be wrong. I love when Stern does just knock out phenomenal work and proves me wrong. I would say we're lucky to have scenarios like that where it's just it gives you chills to think about. The dog just does incredible work, pulls a rabbit out of a hat. You find an animal dead that you never would have found without a qualified tracking dog. We're lucky to have that happen a dozen times a year, you know? So I would say what comes to mind for me is probably the first time that ever happened for us in our career, the first really solid recovery where it's like the heavens have parted and the angels are singing and oh my God, I have a tracking dog and I'm not just out here hoping for the best, hoping I know what I'm doing, but we really are a professional team. And that was one, surprise, surprise, it was a bear. But it was the recovery that we just didn't think was going to pan out for us. And she took it over 2/3 of a mile with no blood and found the bear successfully, you know, and it was just the hunter cried. You know, it was just a really good moment. We were so grateful to Stern for her work there. Or even the picture that you have up on the screen right now is another really nice one like that. Where that fella, the hunter who shot that bear, he and I still talk to this day. Like I consider him a friend. That's Tom Kaiser with Funny Hole Bear Bait. If you're in Minnesota, he's down in Waseca, Minnesota. He sells good bear bait. That's the guy to talk to. That bear of his was our last bear call of the year last year. So it's always like Christmas to get a bear call at the very end of the season because things kind of start to slow down. And he calls me, he says, I don't have a spot of blood. I don't know. I don't know what could have happened. I thought I was aiming well, but I don't have anything to track. Can you come out and help me? And he'd never worked with a tracking dog before, ever. So pressure's on, right? I'm like, okay, I got to make a good impression. You know, this guy sells bear bait, so he knows what he's talking about with bear hunting. And if he thinks that we're goofing off out here or somehow he doesn't think I know what I'm doing, I don't know what would happen. I don't want to find out. Stern got out there and she took that bear almost 900 yards without a single speck of blood. The only thing that we had to go off of was a swipe of like translucent membrane that came out of one of her wounds. And that was maybe 30 yards before we started coming up on where she had bedded. Just a phenomenal example of what a really solid tracking dog can do. And that is a bear that never, ever, ever would have been found without us. There was nothing to go off of. Tom was not kidding. There was no blood at the hit site. He made a pretty good shot. The bear just turned at the last minute, and the entry and the exit wounds both clogged up with fat to where there just wasn't any external bleeding at all. And that's pretty normal for bears, especially in the late season. There's a really dense, heavy layer of fat and hide on them, so they don't like to bleed very much. Like I said, it makes a good tracking dog look like magic. But those kinds of recoveries, I think, are why I like tracking bears so much in the first place. But why I like tracking as a whole is just because, you know, without a hint of ego, you know, that they just wouldn't have found it without you. You kind of get to come in and swoop, save the day. You get to see the dog do some incredible work. It really never gets old, clearly, because I keep doing it. But those are my favorite stories. Those are the kinds of things that keep me doing this on the hard days.
There's a great photo of Stern. That's one of my favorite watching with the deer antlers that Chris, that one you just showed with the deer antler. Yeah. That's one of my favorite I've seen so far.
That was such a fun recovery too. That one was really hard. That specific deer gave us a run for our money. It was pretty early on in our career. And that deer was shot a little bit back and he was running really hard. So he was full of testosterone, like all roided out. I don't think that deer knew what hit him. I really am not sure that he even knew he was wounded in the first place. And it sounds goofy, but that tends to happen at least a handful of times a year, especially in the late season during the rut, where some of these bucks are so focused on chasing chicks that they do not acknowledge. They have no idea that they've been hit in the guts, and they're just going to keep walking. I shoot you not. I have seen like trail cam videos of bucks that have intestines hanging out of their side, and they're still chasing does. I mean, can you imagine how horrifying that would be if you're getting like hit on by some guy sitting on a bar stool somewhere and his insides are on his outsides and he's just like, hey, baby. That's what these bucks are doing. So the buck in that picture stood out to me as a really good example, I think, of a buck that just wasn't releasing the concentration of adrenaline and cortisol and, oh man, I'm in trouble hormones that Stern is trained to track. And that made it really difficult. That hunter was so patient with us. He must have daughters. Because he was willing to step back and said, you girls do your work. I trust you. And thank God he did, because we did find it. It wasn't as quick and pretty of a tracking job as I would always like to hope for. But we were stubborn. I knew that had to be a dead deer somewhere, and just the combination of me and Stern being willing to put the pedal to the metal is what sealed the deal. So we found that buck, and the hunter was just thrilled with us. That I keep that picture as a reminder that, honestly, we don't know everything. It ain't always pretty, but we're pretty stubborn. So in scenarios where I think it might be a dead animal, I mean, I've been known to track the same animal for like 2 or 3 consecutive days sometimes. I don't like to give up any more than my dog likes to give up. So bucks like that one in that picture are what keeps you coming back on animals that just should be dead.
So we're getting close to our time limit, but I got to hear one more story because I love your stories, and I think your stories are so. God, please, I don't want this to come out wrong, but the fact that it's a woman just makes it so much better for me, because
I get what you mean.
I know I would shit my pants if a bear came running. I'm just telling you. If you read it down here in the comments, the Chubby Buck Wildlife Feed, you're better than me. I would have shit my britches. I mean,
my tracking pants are brown for a reason. I won't say I'm any better than you guys. I just don't have any self-preservation apparently because I keep doing it.
But I think your stories are just incredible because, like I said before, it's not a job if you love what you're doing. And you can tell by your passion of what you're doing that, you just trust the dog and you love going every day to do this. So your stories for me are awesome. What was your most difficult track?
Oh God, most difficult. We had a scenario where I think it may have been similar to the buck that I was telling you about, that I honestly am not sure that buck knew or cared that he had been shot, at least for the first couple 100 yards. And we were called to track a buck, and we knew it was a gut shot. It was a really gutty arrow, just gross. I've been known to lick a lot of arrow fletchings to tell if it's gutty because you can taste it. Don't try this at home, but you can taste it. This one I didn't even have to lick. There was no question. This arrow had just gone sideways. Like I said, the hunter was making a good shot. The deer turned at the last minute. It happens to the best of us. Really, really nice guy. We get out there and almost immediately get just mollywopped with a thunderstorm. And I'm talking like 15, 20 mile an hour winds. The wind is changing on the regular. Really not great conditions for a tracking dog to do their best work. Rain helps scent conditions, believe it or not. I like tracking during the rain. The wind was awful. That does not help us. And in this case, it definitely didn't help us that night. We worked for, oh my God, probably 6 hours trying to figure out where this poor guy's deer had gone. And he was so patient with us, and the wind was just not it. We couldn't come up with anything. I knew that deer was dead. I absolutely knew it. With that arrow, there was no question. And sometimes stuff happens. You just don't have anything the same day you're tracking. But this hunter was such a trooper. I looked at him. We're standing pouring rain. We look like soaked rats, just miserable. It's like 3 a.m. I look at him and go, you want to come back in the morning? And he goes, yeah. And thank God he did. And that was a really, really difficult one. 2 consecutive days. We came back the following day, and Stern cut a line that she hadn't taken before. She cuts a new line. And I'm like, don't get excited. We're going to follow her. The wind was not an issue the morning after. It was calm and still and just beautiful scent conditions, like 50 degrees. And she cuts a line, and we go like 500 yards. And then I start hearing birds. And I'm getting my hopes up because crows do this thing that when you spend enough time in the woods with them, you kind of find out they talk about food sources. They make specific vocalizations, and you hear them once and you never forget it. You know what they're talking about. And I'm like, they're talking about a dead deer. I guarantee it. And I'm like, don't get your hopes up. Don't get excited. Just keep following the dog. And the dog's cruising a straight line. She looks great. It's a 180-degree difference compared to what we had the night before in that horrible storm. And sure enough, we come up probably 500 yards in the opposite direction from what we had the night before. I can't account for it except for that we're just really stubborn. And that was a really hard track. But we stuck with it, and we found that deer. And thank God the hunter was willing to trust us for 2 consecutive days. This was pretty early in our career too. So there's a lot of like self-doubt and imposter syndrome that comes with it. But we got it done. We sealed the deal. We were able to get that hunter his deer. I was, again, not in love with the process that day. It wasn't the prettiest track we've ever done in our lives, but I tell you, stuff like that is what makes you a tracker, is realizing that statistically speaking, not only is not every track going to be perfect, but 60% of the animals that we're hired to track are just not dead. And even of the 40% that are dead, some of them don't smell right. Some of them run onto property that you can't access. Some of them, they just do some crazy stuff and you don't end up catching up to them. And so it really tests your patience. It tests your resolve. And tracks like that one are probably the toughest. When you know it's dead, there's just something going on with the conditions or the weather or the dog that day that you can't square it out. So at least that one had a happy ending where we were just really stubborn and we stuck with it and we got it done. But the hardest tracks by far are, the ones where you know it should be there. And for whatever reason, a tracking dog is phenomenal and a really well-trained, qualified dog can pull miracles out of a hat. But sometimes they're still a dog. They can still make mistakes. And you have to be honest that, you're not a supernatural, wonderkin. You're not out there doing miracles every day of the week. Sometimes you're really just a soaking wet canine handler in the pouring rain with a hunter looking at you like you're crazy and you have no idea what you're doing except that there should be a dead deer. And for whatever reason, there just isn't. That happens a handful of times a year. And those are really, really difficult.
So a viewer comment, and we're close to our time here, but I want to try to fit this in. A viewer comment, I thought was a great question. Do you find trouble with shoulder shots? My friend is a tracker and has a lot of trouble with shoulder shots.
So if we're describing trouble as they're not dead and they're almost impossible to catch up with a leashed dog, I would say a vast proportion of the animals that we are hired to track that we don't successfully recover are shot in the shoulder. Especially with archery, you're just not going to get an arrow through the scapula, deer or bear, it doesn't matter. Anything in the range of the shoulder is a no-go zone. That's almost 99% of the time not going to kill that animal. I tell folks, especially with bears, but as a whole, when they're aiming, it's always safest to go a couple inches further back than you think you really need to. Because if you're aiming right on the shoulder and that animal moves at the last second, you've got a game of millimeters to where you're either going to hit that shoulder blade and you're going to have to call a tracking dog and we're not going to be able to show you very much. Like this shot this evening that we just came in from tracking, almost definitely shot in the shoulder. And it sucks. We can't show them anything. There's not a dead deer to find. So in terms of trouble with them, the trouble is that they're almost never dead. But really what it comes down to is, I hope, hunter education and helping folks understand shot placement and how to improve their odds a little bit better. And honestly, just the luck of the draw. It really is a game of inches sometimes. Those shoulder shots are the bane of my existence.
So, Julie, a couple things before we go. I definitely want to make sure we cover. Anybody in Minnesota looking for a tracking to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I work as part of a statewide network. So if you are anywhere in the state of Minnesota, you can go on Facebook or to our website. It's Minnesota Tracking Dogs. Easy as. And we have a list, like a map that outlines every qualified tracker in the state. We have a qualified tracker in almost every county in all of Minnesota. So that's your one-stop shop. That's the best place to find not only me, but another qualified certified tracker. Otherwise, if you are outside the state of Minnesota, you can go to the United Blood Trackers website, and that's a nationwide organization that has a similar function where they connect hunters in need with qualified trackers. And they have a map on their website that will show you whether it's legal or not in your state to use a tracking dog and where your closest tracker is. So two really important resources for any hunters that are watching who might not have used a tracking dog before, might not know who to call. If you're in Minnesota, it's Minnesota Tracking Dogs. If you're in the northern Minnesota, Bemidji area, it's Stern Game Recovery. But anywhere around the country, UnitedBloodTrackers.com is a one-stop shop for legislative info, for anybody looking to start tracking with their own dog. United Blood Trackers has resources to help you get started training, and it will get you in touch with a tracker anywhere in the country. So that's the one. If I could get that in anybody's brain, United Blood Trackers, anywhere in the country, we can get you taken care of.
And one thing I didn't ask, I really have to ask, because I need to confirm, I'm sure I know the answer. Stern is a German Shepherd.
Yes. Yep. She is a purebred German Shepherd. Folks are always surprised to hear that because she's a shrimpy little animal. She's just a little dog. She is a Czech working line, so from the Czech Republic. And man, they just breed them lean and mean out there. She is not very big, but she's got a lot of heart. So she's a working line as opposed to the show line or pet quality German Shepherds that we tend to have on the United States side of things. But she is a 100% a German Shepherd.
I was certain of that. My brother had a dog just like it, and I was like,
Yeah.
I better ask because I sure don't want somebody thinking I'm. Stern deserves the credit to know what all the hard work he puts in. He definitely deserves the credit to.
I agree. I'll tell her you said so.
So I always end every show with this question. So, in your field and your expertise, and I'm going to call it expertise because I sure can't do it. You might not, but I'm calling it expertise. If there's somebody looking to get into it or looking to maybe try it, get a dog and try to get that, what would you recommend for them to do? Where would they start?
Shadow another tracker. Every day of the week, I would recommend before anybody even starts looking at training their own dog, looking at buying a dog to start training, get a feel for what the work actually is. No one is going to be a millionaire by tracking. Like I personally, we work for tips. Stern and I, we definitely don't even break even on gas money and vet bills by the end of the year. This is not like a job you do if you're looking to rake in the dough. But really following an experienced tracker and their dog on real life calls to get a feel for what to expect, what good work looks like, how to problem solve when you're not getting good work, what some of the factors are that can contribute to a track kind of going sideways. But I think bar none, the most formative thing that I did when I was starting out was spend that first year following that other female tracker. Her name is Sheena. If she's watching this, Sheena, I still owe you a beer. She was just incredible. She was such a great resource for me to learn from and to make sure that this was something I really wanted to do and was serious about. And still to this day, she and I are good friends. I text her sometimes. I'm like, hey, how's it going? You want to get back into tracking? You want to come help me? But she was just a rock star. So get in touch with your state's network through United Blood Trackers, or if you're in Minnesota, come join us at Minnesota Tracking Dogs. We will get you in touch with someone you can follow around in the field and ask all your questions, and they will help you start training because the world needs more tracking dogs. We have more work than we could ever physically cover. So it's always a matter of making sure that you know what you're in for, but there should always be a qualified tracker in your neck of the woods who's able to help you.
Some great advice. I appreciate that greatly. And Juliet, I hate our time limit because if we don't cut our time limit, here's what happens. We end up not putting you on our podcast for Apple, iTunes, and all those things. So we want to make sure we make that limit. So we always cut the show in time to make sure.
It's all good.
I appreciate you greatly. And Stern is phenomenal. Just watching your stuff and all your recoveries is great. So we appreciate you greatly. And I look forward to actually talking to you more and maybe getting you back on the show. So something to think about.
Hey, absolutely.
We can talk about a lot of other things. We don't have to talk about tracking. We can make it a day to talk about maybe some of your foraging and other stuff you do.
I'm sure you can tell I'm really easy to get to talk. So be careful what you wish for. But I appreciate you guys having us on to talk your ear off about tracking dogs. I love what I do. So any opportunity to shoot about it is awesome.
Well, we appreciate it greatly. And again, keep up what you're doing. We love watching your content. We love watching them through, and we super appreciate you joining us tonight.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you guys very, very much for having me.
Thank you, hon. God bless. Everybody else, have a great day.